So, good morning, Ara.
Morning, Nikos.
I would like to ask you, have you had any feedback from our two previous discussions that are posted online?
I talked to some of my friends um, who I went to architecture school with, and one of them was familiar with you. He had seen one of your um, interviews, I think, on YouTube before, and we were talking, and he was asking me, "What did they say about Björk Ingels?" And I was like, "I don't. We didn't talk about Björk Ingels," but I said I assume Nikos and wouldn't be fans of Björk Ingels. Um, I don't remember what, but oh, and there was a comment. Someone said that he is in architecture school and also um new to the seeing the value of the traditional architecture. Um yeah, so but I mean I think it's really good we're having these conversations. I think that they're very important and I'm really grateful. I've been trying to I regularly write a list of 10 things I'm grateful for, and one of them was talking with you and Anne and really talking about issues that don't get talked about enough, like the human experience, our built environment, the importance it has on. I heard you say this before, that like it affects the way our brains develop,
Yes, yes.
and that's why we have to take it seriously. Hey, Anne.
And hello, Anne.
Hi, I'm getting ready for Halloween. Here you go. To show you if I can get this going. There you go. See?
Fantastic, fantastic. Okay, so just before you joined, one of Ara's architect friends asked what we two think of Bjarke Ingels. And I'm going to answer this question in a roundabout way. The architectural establishment, which is driven and financed by real estate speculators and supported by the press, has a certain conception of architecture. And you have architects who become famous by filling in what is required and building rather ugly, expensive, and not human buildings. So it does not serve any purpose to discuss individual names. They just see the opportunities for the career and they fill it, and they design buildings that are not adaptive, that are not good for human health, and they make money. So they occupy the professional space that has been opened up by 1 century of modernism. So it's not good to pick on these people. They're just occupying that space. It's an ecosystem space. What is shocking to Anne, myself, and a group of friends is that the public is not demanding humane architecture. So you never see names of the many people around the world today are capable and do design humane architecture, which looks very, very different from these star architects. And do you have anything to add to that?
I guess the issue is the foundational thinking they have is false. The mind is not a blank slate. It's not tabula rasa, and that's what they're thinking. They think it is. And that's false. I think the other thing that's fascinating to see is how modern buildings age so poorly, whereas traditional do not. And you really see this in London when you go there, because of the London Blitz was so severe. You see these great traditional blocks in London, and all of a sudden a modern building, and it will it's aged terribly. Whereas the traditional buildings around it that might be 150, 200 years old look great. So it's just it's not sustainable. That's what's fascinating to me. What's really fascinating to me too is how the business world, there was recently an article in Scientific American special edition about de-siloing and how in academia things stay in silos, whereas in the business world, they don't. So if you go to business school at the University of Massachusetts, or if you go to business school at Suffolk University in downtown Boston, you're going to have an eye tracking lab, facial expression lab, record galvanic skin response, sweat glands, to everything you design. They really have incorporated med science into the business school curriculum. Whereas the architecture schools, maybe it's an elective, but it hasn't been incorporated. I just looked, there's no requirement to take a biology or psychology or neuroscience course to get a master's, bachelor's, or license in architecture.
Okay, and that's a condemnation of the educational system. But the big question is, how about the business itself? We're talking
Well,
about
the business
hundreds
world
of
runs
billions.
business.
Wait, Ara said, we're dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars. A new building that's going to require massive retrofitting in 30 years versus a new building that will stay 50, 100, 150, 200 years. Why isn't the client who pays to build this thing, why isn't the builder notice this difference that you just mentioned?
Well, often they don't know they have a choice. They don't realize there's a choice. The client often doesn't know there's options. And the client also doesn't know there's now technology that we can predict how quickly someone finds a front door to the new hospital you're building. There's technology that can predict whether someone even likes looking at the new housing unit. It's fascinating, you know, what's happening. They don't realize they have that option. I think the problem I noticed when I got out of grad school and started working in architecture is it's really, the business is not run by architects. The business is run by capitalists and bankers and realtors.
Oh, yeah, okay, but that may offer a hope, because the architects have their mind full of images and hero worship and stuff. But when you go to the actual business, people who make the business decisions, they make the same stupid decisions. So why is this the case? Why do the funders of...
Well, and they think in a very different way. They think about what happens if the interest rates grow up. What is the spread? What happens if how much can we market this for? They really think in terms of the spreadsheet, which I never even learned to read when I went to architecture school. So what defines modern architecture is business practices that are, you know, it's basically the realist. Architects really are not in control of the industry. The business world is. Business people are. And at the same time, the business people aren't applying the neuroscience the way they are in other fields, in other aspects of their profession.
Yeah, okay,
it's a little bit odd.
You just said the business world. The business world in advertising spends 90% of its budget on neuroscience so they can know how to influence the customer or to see what the customer wants. Why isn't the business of building giant buildings? No, why do they
somehow they haven't? I think what's
ignorant?
happened is in the spreadsheets they haven't put that in. What will the feeling be? And I think there's, you know, it's really interesting too, even at colleges and universities, I think often the business people are in charge more than the professors running the schools. I think there's been this big pivot. Here, I want to show you something. Here's an image. I'm not sure you can see it. It's a new building that just went up in Greater Boston and downtown Boston near Newbury Street. Can you see the building?
Yes, I can see it.
Yeah.
And so what they just did, it's a really ugly building, brand new, and I think mostly empty. And what they did though, check what they did. They just put in pictures of 12 people. They put in giant posters. And I walk to the end of the street and I look up and I immediately look at the faces. And suddenly
Yes.
the building looks becoming.
Yes, but it's an essentially...
So what they have to add.
It's essentially an inhuman, ugly design that's made prettified by the pictures of people.
Yeah.
Why can't they learn the attractive qualities
I'll
of the
tell you
face?
why. I'll tell you why. Because often people have a hard time facing things. And I think a lot of it is modernism was a result of war. And we don't, as Margaret Macmillan says in her best-selling 2020 book, War, How Conflict Shaped Us, we don't look at how war gave us our world. We don't want to look at it.
Okay, but look.
Modernism was, everyone wanted to run from it. And so the idea is we're running. That's why people don't even second guess this horrible building that just went up next to the charming Back Bay architecture, which is beautiful. Why did they build this 50 feet from the Back Bay buildings that are so beautiful? Well, why? Because they don't even want to look at it. We don't want to look at our past. That's the problem.
Look, Anne, I'm a big fan of your work, but I will play devil's advocate. We are in 2024, we are long past the First World War. What effect can it possibly have today on the architecture of today to force architects and clients
No,
to
we're
put up this
not.
horribly
No,
ugly
I'm
building?
going to play devil's advocate with you. We're not past. We haven't looked at the impact of war. And that's why Margaret Macmillan's book, War, How Conflict Shaped Us, the New York Times called it one of the 10 best books of 2020. She's a retired professor emeritus teaching at Oxford, I think, of history. That we don't look at how war gave us our world. And she says that's going to do us in. And one of the ways we don't look at it, the rush to embrace plastics, the rush to take wheat germ out of bread. Why did we do that? We wanted to be modern because we wanted to forget the past. So part of the reason traditional architecture hasn't come back and we're not building it is because it was part of, oh, we're going to forget the past, we're not going to talk about it. And there's a good reason we wanted to forget the past. 20 million casualties, World War I, 20 years later, World War II, 60 million casualties. You don't want to talk about it. Let's go. We're going to forget the past.
And I will insist on countering you, because we have young architects who are 25 years old who have absolutely no knowledge of these horrific events in the past, yet who sit down on the computer screen and design a horrible, anxiety-inducing building.
But of
Why?
course they are, because they're taught by people like, I went to UCLA, I have a master's in architecture from UCLA. Traditional architecture was never even presented as an option.
Yeah.
They're taught by the people who taught them, their parents or grandparents were probably in World War I and World War II. They embraced modernism. And in some way, modernism is good. I mean, I like electricity. I like being able to turn on the tap and have water. I like the fact we have sewers. That's good. But the fact is, other aspects of it simply don't work. Now I go to the beach and I pick up plastics. It's incredible what we've done to the ocean in 50 years. It's astonishing. Modernism doesn't work, and we don't want to look at that. Why? Well, there's a good reason. We adopted modernism in part, not only because of new industry, not only because of new tech, but also because of the horror of what we'd lived through. And the brain shuts down in the face of horror and moves on. War really did give us our world. Like the idea, there's a fantastic book about Germany in World War I and how they became, this is amazing. One of the conclusions of the book, they argue it's kind of difficult to make conclusions about what happened to Germany in World War I, but then they say there's one conclusion. Germans became experts at ferro-concrete construction. Because they built so many bunkers, because they built so many trenches, they really got to understand how to build with concrete, ferro-concrete construction. That's incredible. What they're saying there is without World War I, you wouldn't have gotten brutalism. You wouldn't have Boston City Hall, this ugly behemoth that's on no Boston postcards, never is featured in anything come to Boston. Nobody would ever feature that. They only feature the antique buildings.
Okay, so why do all architecture schools lie, presenting brutalism as some sort of advanced, instead of saying that it is outgrowth of the bunkers of World War I, not World War II?
Because that's also, you have to have compassion for us, our brains. It can be very difficult to look at pain. It can be very difficult to look at loss. Why are we talking English? Why aren't we talking German? Why aren't we talking French? Why aren't we talking Yiddish? Because of war, guys. War gave us our world. Margaret Macmillan's book, you've got to read it, Ara. You've got to read it. It'll change your life. Margaret Macmillan's book, nobody ever told me. And she's such a good writer because she taught for 40 years. So it's like it's like 10 lectures in a row. So brilliant. Did you know?
What is it called?
War, How Conflict Shaped Us.
War, How Conflict.
It's brilliant. And it's like $25. I learned things I should have learned, but nobody ever taught me. Do you know what war in history was the first war in human history where soldiers could read?
No.
What was the first war where all the soldiers could read?
Maybe World War I.
Nikos is right. It wasn't until 100 years ago that all the soldiers could read, because the military suddenly realizes, oh my God, we better have education in a national language because having soldiers read is really valuable. It wasn't until 100 years ago soldiers could read.
Yeah, and then World War I killed all the educated young men.
And then you get people like Fitzgerald writing about it, right? F. Scott Fitzgerald, he was an ambulance driver in World War I. You know, so it's like war, we don't even realize, oh my God, the idea of everybody being able to read, everybody, that's a new idea.
Okay, listen,
I could go on
Ara,
and we
wait,
don't want
wait.
to look at, but the big idea is, there's this great quote, Buddhist quote, Daisaku Aikida. A successful vision of the future is not possible without an accurate knowledge of the past. And we don't look at our past. We don't look at how war gave us our world. We don't look at how, my God, if it weren't for the Protestant religion, we probably wouldn't have America, you know?
Okay, we're here at the invitation of Ara, who has specific questions on how to improve contemporary architecture. And we have been hogging the conversation. So Ara, please, more.
But I mean, it's been fascinating. I mean, so okay, so what I'm wondering is in LA, in a city like LA, if we were to make the right type of building, would it even matter? Because like everything is already so spread apart. Like no one's walking on the sidewalk anyway. Everyone's driving at least 30 minutes to, like, some people are driving 2 to 3 hours every single day. And like I mean, the buildings, a lot of them, they are, even though they're ugly, they're well lit. I mean, the ones that are well lit and well ventilated are relatively good. And it's like I wouldn't mind living in a building like that. But it's like if we incorporate all these principles that make the building better for the public realm, experiencing it from the exterior, like it feels like it wouldn't even matter here, just because of the way the city is set up. Like it's already set up
So
wrong.
LA, you have to read that book by Charles Maroon, Confessions of a Recovering Engineer. And it's all about Confessions of a Recovering Engineer. It's all about how the pivot, again, not to wrap on this too much. Why did the pivot to car centrism happen in the United States? The pivot, war. It's exactly because of war. The reason LA looks like it does is because of war. What happened? Well, what happened is 1929, 1939, there's the Great Depression. Not a good time for General Motors and Ford. Then what happens? 1939, 1945, World War II. It's huge. What happens? The government hires all the big car companies to make tanks and everything for the war. They bloom, they blossom. They have so much money coming in for the war, right? We win World War II. What happens? The government sends them a note. No more money. You're done. The car companies freak out. They think they're going to go back to the Great Depression. So they pivot to non-evidence-based car in every garage without seatbelts, running leaded gas. That's the new modern future. Impossible without war.
Wow.
Let me tell Ara a story that he may not be aware of. Starting in the late 1940s and early 1950s, the government, in collusion with the car manufacturers, presented a series of expositions, like the diorama,
right,
presenting the future Corbusier city of cars running around as the model of the future, the Tomorrowland.
But that was, you have to understand the human brain, that when trauma happens, we do want to forget about it. So modernism it pivoted by the fact we're going to run from the past. Gropius would say to his students at Harvard, he was invited at Harvard, I think in 1934, to teach his Bauhaus modern techniques. Forget the past, start from zero. Well, Gropius had PTSD. You know, I showed pictures of Gropius's house that's 8 miles from where I'm sitting. And I showed it to a professor at Harvard Medical School. And he says to me, duh, every image is PTSD. But post-traumatic stress disorder, the idea that the body keeps the score, that trauma stays in the body, that trauma actually changes each cell and the shape of the brain, they didn't know that till like really the 1980s. And then they started magnetic resonance imaging, so you can see soft tissue. The problem with X-ray, you can only see hard bones. With magnetic resonance imaging, you can see soft tissue. After Vietnam, the veteran's brain is different than before. They didn't know that. The word post-traumatic stress disorder wasn't even the manual until 1980, 10 years after Gropius Mies van der Rohe's death. They didn't even know. And you didn't want to look at the past. It was all about being modern. Forget the past.
And I want to interrupt you because I want to answer Ara's question. And it has to do with the urban fabric. At the same time that the design of individual buildings changed drastically, the design of the city changed drastically. And that's a result of Los Angeles. You have a non-human city that is navigable only by car.
Yeah.
And the damage was done on all scales, from the scale of a window to the scale of the building, to the scale of the block, to the scale of the region of the city.
But
that's
the thing
why,
is, too, is but the reason Walt Disney does Disneyland in California, right? Why does he do it? Because he realizes Disneyland grew up, at the turn of the century, and he could plan the streets. He has 2 daughters in Los Angeles. He's realizing in the 50s they can't plan the street. Too many cars, too unsafe. So he makes Disneyland Main Street replicating a happy street, free car. And you park outside it, and you have to pay $140 to get in. It's ridiculous what happens.
There are free solutions that duplicate Disneyland. These are new traditional developments of a few blocks together, say 10 blocks or so, that restructure, infill, make the streets narrower, make more pedestrian streets. And you can find those all over the United States. They are condemned by the architectural press, but they become gold mines because people will drive and park nearby, and then it's more than an outdoor mall. It is a neighborhood, and wisely the zoning is mixed use, so people actually own apartments there, and you have restaurants and green spaces and parks. So all over the United States, these are oases of human life. That you don't need a car to navigate. So this is occurring, and this could transform Los Angeles.
Well, also,
if it wasn't for the universal condemnation of the press and architectural academia, who says this is a look to the past. This is to be condemned because it looks at the past. And looking at the past is taboo. It is a religious prescription. You can never look at the past because something bad is going to happen to you.
No, you have to look at the past. And I lived in Santa Monica for 5 years. And most of the time I didn't use a car. And I could get to LA campus, the UCLA campus without one. And they had a really good bus service, so it worked. We did get one car eventually, but you could live there without a car in Santa Monica really easily.
Yeah.
You need to, but I think what it's going to be, especially your generation, you're going to be saddled with fixing it, because Nikos and I are from the baby boom generation. There's 70 million of us. I don't think you want 70 million 85-year-olds driving, or 50 million 85-year-olds driving. It's going to be a disaster. And it's not, again, holistic thinking. The modernist paradigm is not scientific, isn't based on evidence-based design, does not work. America, I just checked it yesterday, we've now fallen to 48th in longevity worldwide. We have the lowest longevity of any developed country. 40% of the people are obese. That's one of the reasons we had so many COVID morbidities, because they had the comorbidity of obesity, which diminish their chances of survival. And we have 30% higher carbon footprint. So it just does not work on any level. And what's amazing too is how other cities in Europe, their public transport is just fantastic. Have you been to Copenhagen? Have you been to Berlin? Have you visited that, Ara?
I haven't been to Germany. I've been to Amsterdam, and I've been to France, Italy, and where else have I been? Well, in France, I've been to Paris and Bordeaux. In Italy, I went all over, and I've been to London, and I've done some traveling, and I see definitely how the way the city is arranged makes a huge difference in the lifestyle, and it's like just living in that place, like you're healthier. Like
Oh,
just
you're
going
healthier,
to
you're healthier,
Italy,
you don't, yeah, you're healthier.
you
You're
come
not.
back feeling better.
I lived in Paris for 5 years in my 20s, and I realized I could always tell the Americans they were more overweight.
Yeah.
And I was that's actually what got me into this field, is like, what's going on here? And the Americans would only spend their time hanging out in the traditional parts of Paris. They'd never go to Tour Montparnasse. They'd never go to the modern part. They'd only go to the traditional part. So we don't realize what we've lost. And we realize, just like you want evidence-based medicine, you need evidence-based design. And we don't have that for our hospitals. We don't have that in the United States. It's a new way of thinking.
Let me interrupt you. Unfortunately, there has been a group of people saying that they do evidence-based design for the last 15 years. They're charlatans. They don't do evidence-based design. So we need to keep that in mind, because if you look at the literature, you find these writings that have nothing to do with evidence-based design.
Right.
You guys want to know what like interested me about brutalism and like the contemporary architecture when I was in architecture school? It was like when you look at it, like you don't get it right away and you have to like stare at it. Versus like if it was all traditional buildings, like you look at it and it feels like you get it and you're kind of bored of it. But when it's like a strange form, it's like, oh, what's going on here? And I try to figure out how the thing works. And it's like it just makes the process more interesting to look at that kind of building and design that kind of building. Like if there's some like, I don't know, strange geometry with it, it something about it makes it more exciting. I don't know.
Okay, let me explain what's going on. In a nice traditional building, you look at it, you get it, but it's unconscious. It's unconscious, and then you can go ahead with whatever you're doing in your life, because the background is healing, and then you can play with your children, you can do your job, you can walk to an office with that healing background.
Right, exactly.
It does not detract your attention. So a lot is going on. See, you are incorrect to say, well, it's boring. It is that it does not attract your conscious attention, because it's all in the background and it's all healing your body in the background. That's why after going to Italy, you came back and you felt healed, because you spent so much time in a healing background. Whereas the brutalist building comes out and punches you in the nose, and you say, oh, this is interesting, because it draws my attention, but it's an unhealthy attention.
Right. It's dissociative. And what's so interesting about humans, because we have such a big brain, 3 times the size of a chimpanzee, Mother Nature had to preset some of our things for us. Because we were born so helpless because of that brain size, she decided for us to survive, we have to non-consciously attach. So the non-conscious attachment secures our survival. So that's what it is. It's the consequence of, it's the externality evolutionarily from having such a big brain and being so helpless. Like I read, I think somewhere, a giraffe, after it's born, it can walk 3 hours later or something. That is not a human being. Yeah, we are so helpless. And so and if you're around a baby, a young baby, the child will look for your eyes instantly and seek to attach to them. It's fascinating. So that attachment pivots over to how we experience non-consciously the built environment. So again, your architectural education is bogus, but that's a reason it's bogus, because the trauma of war was so bad, everybody wanted to forget the past. You have to be compassionate for the ancestors, even if your teachers weren't in the war, their parents or grandparents were, their professors were.
I was working on a video called, sorry to cut you off. I was working on a video called Every Project I Did in Architecture School, and I just uploaded it this morning. And as I was working on it, I was like, man, I learned a lot of software. I learned a lot of like how to stand up in front of a group of people and how to present a project and like make them care about what I care about. So like, I hesitate to say that it's bogus, because there was a lot of value I got out of architecture school.
Well, I would argue that the foundational thinking is bogus. The mind is not a blank slate. It's preset what you need to see. It's preset that people will always be healthier living in Europe than the United States if we keep building modern ways. It's preset by nature that you need to walk 12 miles a day to be at your best. That's the Harvard evolutionary biologist Dan Lieberman. It's preset. If you live in Paris, if you live in Lower Manhattan, you can do that. You're going to get more depression, more chance for autoimmune disorders. And now the new studies are coming out, Nikos, if you don't walk at least 4,000 steps, and you're over 50, your chances of dementia increase by 40%.
Mm.
So the foundational thinking, while you might have learned some skill sets, like how to present, the foundational thinking is false. But there's a reason it's false, because their teachers were because of war. And that's what Margaret Macmillan says. She explains how war makes us want to forget things, but to really survive, we need to look at that. One thing she says that blew my mind, she published a book in 2020, and she writes something else that everybody should know. She writes that in World War I, France, Germany, and Russia all lost 4 million men. But, she says, Russia lost empire. And she wrote that 2 years before Putin invaded, to reclaim what was lost in World War I.
Okay.
So the problem is, we don't look at how war gave us our world.
Can we leave the war? And I have a question for Ara about the relevance of his architectural education. Did the architecture school teach you how to create healing environments that are good for your health unconsciously, that are good for the developing child, for the toddler who is just walking around their indoor apartment, for people walking outside, just regular office buildings?
When I was looking back at some of my projects, like there were some things we did in first year where we were looking at like a very small area and we were designing the heck out of it. Like, and we were making these basswood models, and it was like, okay, we'll make a shaded area here and the person can walk this way. It was like we were designing, I don't know what scale it was, like 1/2 inch equals a foot, doing physical models. And it was like a 400 square foot area, really small area. And when I was looking back at that, I was like, whoa, they were actually making us think about how the human being actually experiences the space. But then when we got later into like 3rd and 4th year, when we were designing museums and concert halls and stuff that we all want to be designing now, it was like kind of out of scale.
Ara, I want to hit on that. Your first projects that you say you designed a small scale model and you designed a shaded area so people can walk there. What convinces you that the person would actually wish to walk there? What scientific evidence did your teachers tell you that, yes, people wish to walk in this direction? They are attracted to walk in this direction. Here are the medical experiments that show which direction people wish to walk. I'm willing to bet $5 that they didn't tell you that because they had no idea. They just said, you design a shaded area and people will walk there. That's just wishful thinking. That's totalitarian thinking. The only people who knew that are the ones who did experiments, like Christopher Alexander, who did experiments to see where do people wish to walk? What are the visual and other factors that attract somebody to walk in this particular direction?
You know what Walt Disney did to design Disneyland, because he realized his kids had nowhere they could play. He sent his Imagineers, that's the word he meant, all over Europe to look at where, get this, to look at where people were happiest. And then they came back from Europe, and then they created Disneyland Main Street with 52 ornate face-like building elevations that were all somewhat different to recreate an Amsterdam street, a Copenhagen street. That's what they did. So imagine if we're designing a hospital for people to be happiest. We don't even think that way. You know, Disney's now a multi-billion-dollar company, and that why? Because they're giving people what they need. Architects don't even look at that.
Walt Disney is on record to saying that when he began planning Disneyland, he went to important architects, and after very shortly, he decided they don't know what they're talking about. They're just making things up. So he stopped collaborating with architects, and he had to do, as Anne says, collect his own data to see what people really like, hard data.
And you know, this is the amazing thing. So Disneyland in California opened, I think, in 1956. By 1965, it was the most visited space in the United States. And then Disneyland Paris opened in 1996. And by 2015 or 16, it was the most visited site in Europe.
So that tells you something. Can you imagine that competing with downtown historic Paris? You know why? Because the stupid French have destroyed Paris by putting here and there some god-awful contemporary
modern
art
buildings,
museum
yeah.
or office building that just destroys the beauty that was there for centuries.
So listen, Ara, I've got to get off the call, but you asked great questions and you put up with me. Thank you so much.
No, I'm learning a lot. And you know what's interesting? So your instructor at UCLA was Tom Main, and I listened to him a lot when I was in architecture school, like more than my actual instructors, because he has a lot of content online. And I mean, I'm still a fan of his, and he has, like, in case anyone's not familiar, like this is what his buildings look like. They're super iconic. And when I was in grad school at GSAP at Columbia, he came to critique some students for one of the studios. And there was a group of two that had a project that looked just like one of his projects. It was a tower with like all these crazy steel and glass parts. And he said, Tom Main said, it's too iconic. It doesn't match the context. And the critique, and it was like, I was kind of mind blown because it looked just like one of his projects. But he was saying it doesn't feel humane, it's too iconic, it doesn't match the context. And it really struck. So it's like man, I don't know if his way of thinking.
No, he's a master. He's a master at marketing. He was really entertaining. His class was a lot of fun, but he's a master at marketing. He didn't think like Disney. Where do people want to be? What will look good 50 years ago? What I see with modern buildings, what happens in this town is all the modern architecture schools get torn down after 30 years. And the traditional schools are now converted to housing. So the lifespan of a modern art building built in the 20th century is basically 30 to 50 years. The lifespan of a traditional school built before 1910 is 150, 200, 300 years. That's how it works. And it's fascinating. So, I mean, I'd be happy to talk more. We also now have a research license with iMotions.com. They're the same company that does eye tracking and facial expression. It's like GM and Tesla are their clients. I'd be happy to do it with your firm or with you or with your alums. I'd be happy to do a research project. You need to get the science out there to know that you can measure facial expressions. You can measure eye tracking. You can now even do, are you ready, guys? This came out in November 2023. You can now do emotional heat maps. So you get a picture and then you run through the software, then you can determine where people will smile or if they'll smile when they look at it. And I mean, it's really important stuff. A woman died, I think I told you this last time, a woman died a year and a half ago on the steps going to a Boston hospital because she had an asthma attack and couldn't find the door. And they've since found a nonprofit to in her memory, but often the hospitals here are the worst designed buildings. With very confusing parking, and I'm sure there's lots of reasons for it. And it's like the hospitals epitomize how we don't know how to design for human health.
And a lot of them don't even have operable windows.
We're over 40 minutes. It's a good time to stop.
I was just saying a lot of the hospitals don't even have operable windows, which is crazy. They're usually fixed.
And then, that would be illegal in Germany. In Germany, every building has to have operable windows. So we have very low standards for understanding. But I think in a way, at the same time, for your generation, this is a pivot. You can bring it back and you can take over.
Thank you so much for checking out this video. Since you made it this far, you might as well click on that circle to subscribe, and then you can turn on notifications if you'd like to not miss any future content. The two videos on the left are the first two conversations I had with Anna and Nikos, and on the video on the right, I sum up my architecture school experience.